What's going on, everyone? Today I'm going to show you how to upgrade the Power to the People starter deck. So if you want to upgrade these, you need to close this, go to your starter decks, you need to select it, and you need to clone it down here because you cannot edit these, and this gives you a copy that you can change to your liking. So the first thing you need to do is you need to click on this bar on your deck box, and if you're in this windowed mode, you need to click up here because it defaults to alchemy and we're upgrading for standard. I've gotten comments from people saying that they can't see the cards I'm adding or they can't play the deck, and that's because we're playing standard, not alchemy. So what is this deck? It is a small power matters, power 2 or less matters. So we have like we scry or we surveil technically when we play a small thing. This gets bigger, this gets flying. This lets us chain spells off the top. This doubles, this is the key card and it's rare, so we can't add anymore, unfortunately, but it doubles effects, and yeah, that's the idea. And then we have another thing, I guess, would be because this trigger doubles triggered abilities, there's lots of like enter the battlefield effects to double with our one rare that we only have one copy of. Anyway, we'll be upgrading this on a budget, 0 rares. So let's start by adding some rares because we can use the rares from other starter decks. So we're going to take out 1 Outlaw Medic for 1 Fortune Loyal Steed. So this is going to be critical for this deck. First off, it's a creature with 2 power or less, which is going to trigger, you know, like all of our stuff. But what's cool about this is when it attacks while saddled and it only needs 1 power to saddle, you get to flicker the creature. You get to exile it, then return it to the battlefield, which is exactly perfect for this deck because the whole point is we're trying to get all these like enter the battlefield effects. This would add an extra counter. We're going to cut this. But this would surveil again. It would trigger this to drain again, right? Because this just cares about when a creature enters. So it's actually perfect. And you can get this for free in the mounts deck, the green-white saddle up deck. So we'll take one of these out for one of these. Now we did just take out a 2-drop for a 3-drop, but that's okay because now we're going to add another rare from another deck. I believe this is from the Outlaw deck. And this doesn't have an enter the battlefield effect, but it is a 1-mana 1/1 Death Touch. When it deals combat damage, you can cast a non-land permanent card from that player's graveyard. And the cool thing about this is our best rare that we technically only have 1 copy of. It makes small creatures harder to block. So this can get through blockers to get extra cards. Unfortunately, we'll have 1 of each, so I don't know how relevant it will be, but you know, it's there. And it's also just a good card. 1-mana 1/1 Death Touch gets us extra cards if the opponent leaves themselves open. And it's better than this 2-mana 1/3 that just draws a card when it dies. It's fine, but I mean, it's really not. So we'll take out one of these, add one of these. Okay, so let's take out Neighborhood Guardian and add Illisilcore Sadistic Pilgrim. So this is going to be a major theme. You'll see as we get through this, but we're going to care a lot about having small creatures enter and re-enter and drain. So the problem with this, it gives a creature +1/+1. The ironic thing is we can make a creature too big to be harder to block, which is weird, but also it's just +1/+1. It's only until end of turn. If this was a +1/+1 counter, I might think it's pretty sweet, but it's not. This, on the other hand, whenever another creature enters, we gain 1. Whenever another creature dies that we control, the opponent loses 1. So the reason this is so important is we are very fast because, you know, we care about these small, aggressive aggro creatures, but we have a hard time finishing games late, and this basically turns all of our creatures into inevitable. You're going to lose 1 life for each thing we have, which is very relevant in this deck. It's also another Death Toucher, which gives us some relevance in the late game, right? Because it makes bigger creatures harder to attack into us, so it works really well. Has 2 power or less, of course, too, and I just like it better than this +1/+1. So let's take these 2 out, add these 2 in. Next, we need to talk about card advantage. We're going to take out Screaming Phantom, which doesn't do too much. 3-mana 2/2 flying is not great, and it does mill a single card, but I really like Airlift Chaplain. It's kind of cool. So, it's a 3-mana 1/1 flying that's terrible. When it enters, we mill 3, so we get 3 of these mills on entering, and then we can either put a plains or a small creature, which is going to be the majority of our entire deck, a small creature from among them into our hand. And if we don't do that, if we whiff, it still gets a counter. So if we whiffed, right, let's just pretend we whiff. This is a 3-mana 2/2 flyer that mills 3, which is like this, that gets 3 attacks without having to actually attack, which is already just better. And the upside is technically it's a 1/1, but we find a land, we find a creature, we get card advantage, which is also pretty awesome. So I just think this is just way worse. Take 2 of these out, add 2 of these in. Also keep in mind, it's just more gas for things like this, right? We get this, which if it dies, is going to make the opponent lose 1, and it's going to give us another card that if it dies, makes the opponent lose 1, and we also have this drain as well. Next, Market Watch Phantom, which is right here. We're going to be taking this out for Nurturing Pixie. So Market Watch Phantom is a 2-mana 2/2. Whenever we play a small creature, it gains flying. So there's no advantage to triggering this multiple times per turn because it gives itself flying, it doesn't give something else flying. If it did, we could give our entire board flying. And I feel like surely, I mean you can just play this. This is just a 2-mana 2/3 flyer. So it's like, that's just strictly better. You're hoping this gets flying. This just has flying and it has 1 extra toughness. I don't know, it's just weird. It's weird to be, there's no real payoff. This, on the other hand, 1-mana 1/1 flying. When it enters, we get to return 1 target non-fairy, non-land to our hand. And if we do that, it gets a counter. So it's a 1-mana 2/2 flyer, so already better than this. And what it does is it lets us return stuff with enter the battlefield effects like this. We can return this, replay it, get more value. We could return this, replay it to exile another card. And it's going to re-trigger this. If we have this in play, we get to double the enter the battlefield effect. We could return this, get another bat. We could play it, get a bat, then bounce it with Nurturing Pixie, play it again, get another bat, which of course is going to gain more life, drain more, gain more life here and drain more. We could get 2 bats if we have this, right? That's the whole idea of this deck. So I just don't really like this very much, and I like Nurturing Pixie quite a bit. Next, I think this card is okay, especially with all the like bouncing and replaying, but it ironically makes our creatures bigger than they need to be, than we want them to be, and I think we can just replace it with, again, I keep saying this in all these decks, it's like one of the best 1-drops in the game right now, at least in white. It is a 1-mana 1/2, so it's above curve, unlike this, although you could put the counter on itself, and then it's a 2-mana 2/3, I guess. But when it enters, we investigate. So this is great for bouncing with like this, for example. We play this, we investigate, get a clue, which we can draw with. Then we can play this, bounce it, replay it, get another clue. It's great to find with this, right? If we play this, we get this, we play it, we get a clue, draw. It's just very good. This is fine, but I don't love it. Gonna take these out for 2 Novice Inspectors. And now for another important aspect of this deck that I like. We're gonna play Helping Hand. So, 2 mana, gives a creature +2/+2. That's not a great rate for 2 mana. And then Investigate, which is fine. Alternatively, 1 mana, return target creature with mana value 3 or less from the graveyard straight to the battlefield. So this continues with this whole play, replay, drain, re-trigger, enter the battlefield effect, surveil some more, right? We can get stuff in the graveyard with this. We have this to mill. We can play this, get a card, let it die, maybe drain some, and then use this to return it, which then mills again, finds another card. I keep going on and on, but that's what we're doing with this deck. What I'm trying to do with this deck. This is fine. I guess fine. But I'd rather have Helping Hand. And I will say, I was using Recommission. So Recommission costs 2. This costs 1. It returns a small thing, which is what we want. And it adds a counter. But I kept finding the counter was actually problematic because it won't count for this. And it actually won't double with Done. So I think it's better. But it actually had a lot of non-synergy with the deck. So I actually swapped it for Helping Hand. You could try Recommission. But I kept finding the +1/+1 counter was actually more harmful than it was supposed to with the Recommission. Next, we can optimize Consuming Ash. You probably know what I'm going to do here, right? Can you guess what I'm going to do? We're going to add Go for the Throat. I don't have black selected. That was very confusing. Alright, Go for the Throat. I mean, this is pretty self-explanatory. Do we want to pay 4 mana to exile a creature and maybe surveil, or do we want to pay 2 to just destroy a non-artifact? 4 mana is just too much for removal. This is self-explanatory. Cheaper removal, better. Which is why we're also going to take out Make Your Move for 2 more of these. So, destroys an artifact, awesome, or an enchantment, or big creatures. I think this is an awesome sideboard card in best of 3, and best of 1. There's just no guarantee it's actually castable, which is always dangerous. This is the type of card you play in a sideboard, but you just don't want something that there's a chance you can't cast in best of 1. So, let's take 2 of these out. Add 2 more Go for the Throats. You could also play cut down. You could play cut down. You could play, some people are playing disfigure now. I don't know if I love it. But I mean, you could play disfigure. The best option would be get lost. It's rare, so I can't add it myself, but it destroys a creature, an enchantment, or a planeswalker. The downside is the opponent gets 2 map tokens, which is very relevant. But the versatility of being able to hit planeswalkers and enchantments is pretty good. So that's an option too. Check your collection if you have like one of these or whatever. Add that in place of one of these. Go for the thirds. But for now, we'll do that. Okay, so I've been talking about all this like reanimation and double triggering stuff. Hero of the Dunes is what we're going to be adding. This card is a cool top end budget option for extra. Like ideally, I'd rather have 3 more of these or at least 2 more of these, but they're mythic. So we're going to play these. And we're going to take out a variety of things. Slimy Dual Leech, the final Outlaw Medic, and actually I think Rankle's Prank is worth taking out. We've added 2 rares, we're going to take 1 out here. So this is 5 mana for a 3/2, which is not great, but when it enters, we can return an artifact or a creature card with mana value 3 or less from our graveyard straight to the battlefield. That's not to hand, so that's cool. And then it gives creatures with a mana value 3 or less, which is, as you see now, the majority of our deck, and it gives them +1/+0. So this does have some Nombo anti-synergy again with this. If we make our creatures too big, it doesn't actually trigger, but it does allow us to either A, punch through a bunch of damage really quick with all of these tiny little creatures we have, and also return something to re-trigger its enter the battlefield effect, and also re-drain, right, with this sort of stuff. We could play this, we could return this, when it enters, we could return this from the battlefield to our hand, then we could replay this, mill something, find something else, and that's sort of this like cyclical repeating, play something, replay it, replay it, and trigger stuff like this. I'm playing 2 of each. It's debate. We should maybe be playing like just 4 of these probably. But this whole idea, it doesn't. It looks like we're only playing like 2. It looks like we're not going to draw very much, but we are effectively playing 4 copies of this effect. So we have this to reanimate, we have this to reanimate, we have this to bounce and replay stuff, and then we have all these enter the battlefield effects like we can surveil, we can draw here. This can get another card, right? If this gets a card, gets killed, we can return it, get another card. Same thing with this. Also exiles a card. We can also use Fortune to constantly flicker all of these things to constantly re-trigger their effects. That's the idea. That's what we're going for. So yeah, it's pretty cool. This stuff, this doesn't really do much for us. Outlaw Medic is just mid. This is just clunky. 4 mana 2/4, and it can give something +1/+0 on Death Touch. We've kind of made up for that. We've added 2 Death Touch creatures already. And the cool thing about these are basically removal spells now, because we can put them in front of stuff, kill something with the Death Touch, and then return it again. So I think it's worth taking out all 3 of these and adding 3 copies of this. I also think because we've added a lot of white cards that we can take out 1 swamp and add 1 plains, just to change that ratio just a little bit there. And that's going to be our upgrades for now, though there's a lot of tuning you can do with this deck. As you can see, we're playing a lot of two copies of this, 2 copies of this, lots of 1-ofs. So you can like play around with the ratios of this deck quite a bit. But in terms of rares, the 2 big ones are already in the deck, and that's Delny and Assemble the Players. These are huge. So Delny, of course, makes stuff hard to block and doubles all of our triggered abilities. I would say if you want to get these in, this is cool, but this is just better, I think, in my opinion. We lose the card advantage of getting 2 cards, but we make up for it by, triggering this twice. By triggering this twice, getting two clue tokens, right? And then this card, of course, lets you cast creatures with power 2 or less from the top of your library. Very cool. Lets you just absolutely chain creatures like crazy. And it's probably better than the reanimation. We don't need to reanimate if we can just chain stuff off the top. So could probably take a couple helping hands out for a couple Assemble the Players, and that would be totally fine, in my opinion. But yeah, you could definitely play around with this deck a lot. You could add more of these. You could go up to like 3 of these, 3 of these. I debated taking these out entirely for 4 Deep Cavern Bats, but I think this is fine. You could play any combination of these. I would say 4 Deep Cavern Bats and 0 of these is probably better, especially since we have this, which would have flying, and this has flying. And then you have like the Death Touch stuff. This has flying as well. This makes flying bats. But yeah, it's a pretty interesting deck. I think it's definitely very casual, but it ended up being pretty fun to play. So that's the deck. Hopefully that's useful. Deck list in the description. Check that out. And in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.